Hey everybody, it's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions, and I thought I would do another video today. Been trying to do like one a week, so there's a few more people starting to watch these, which is great. Numbers are still super low, but you know, it is what it is. I try to bring you guys some like role-playing advice, particularly in Savage Kingdoms, but also D&D, and I do some acting videos as well. I haven't been doing quite as much of those lately because the work has not been great due to COVID. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, as I say. Today's video actually is about clarifications and hidden gems in the Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition core rulebook. The rules right here. Any chance to show it off, right? So, yeah, I have 15 points to make right here on my little notes that I sort of semi-follow. So, yeah, so we're going to go over 15 clarifications and hidden gems within the SK3 core rulebook. So, yeah, so these are just things that need the air cleared and maybe some things that get overlooked a little bit. Pretty much all of this is written in the book. I went through it again. You know, you write this thing, but once you go through edits and trimming stuff away, and you change, you know, you sometimes you yourself as the author, you forget uh, pretty often in my case, kind of what the rule is and what the final rule was and is and shall be and all that sort of thing. So, all right, here's 15 of them, starting with, as you can imagine, number one. These are in no particular order, by the way. Number one, you can't use stack. I can't write apparently. You can't stack stamina costing actions in the same round. So, in other words, you can't in the same combat round. This is a combat thing. So, for example, if you get two actions in a combat round, if you use an action to say go into Berserker Rage, Berserker Rage is probably the best example of this. That's a step that costs a stamina, right, per round of doing it. Every round that you continue to Berserk costs a stamina point. It's very simple. However, during that, you wouldn't be able to use another combat based action that would cost stamina, or really any other action that would cost stamina, including spellcasting. And this does two things. It makes it kind of simple and clean, sort of underhandedly helps players from overspending stamina, actually, because that can be a thing. But mostly it's for kind of realistic or believability purposes when you're berserking, going crazy and frothing at the mouth of the battle rage and that sort of thing. Really hard to concentrate on more subtler things or more mental, spiritual focused things such as spell casting or even a fancy maneuver like trying to disarm someone. So yeah, that's why that rule is there. You can't spend a stamina point on an action when you're already doing an action that costs stamina. So probably kind of common sense, but there it is for clarification. Number two, no talent reduces to 0 points. This comes up somewhat often, even though it's pretty well written in the talents chapter. If you look at the beginning of the chapter, the paragraphs there, it literally says it, I think, in the second or third paragraph. But it can be easy to overlook. So basically, this means so every race and culture has favored talents. And then if you choose a calling, which most people do, callings have favored talents as well. A favored talent means that it is reduced by 1 point. It's a discount. So, say a 3 point talent. We'll use this as an example, and your character wants it. You want it for your character. If it turns out to be favored for your race or culture, and that would reduce by 1, right, to 2 points. And then say it appears in your the calling that you've chosen as a discount as well as a favored, and that would reduce again, so making it 1 point in this example. And then there are some talents that actually reduce other talents if you happen to have that talent. So if you continuing our example, if you have a talent that reduces the talent that they were just talking about, one more time, it doesn't reduce to 0, it only reduces to 1. So you can't reduce it more than 1 point. The only sort of caveat to that is that there's some racial abilities that are basically talents, but they're not a talent. They're a racial ability. It's just they function as a talent. For example, the she race is getting uh, uh, night-sighted, star-sighted, which is basically the night-sighted talent for humans. However, as you can tell in the verbiage right there, the she have it as a racial ability. They're born with it. whereas a human has it as a talent, meaning that they must learn how to do it. So, right. Verbiage is very important. Okay, number 3. You can't cast 2 spells in the same round slash turn, or your turn in the round. Again, speaking in, say, combat or action scenes. But you may attempt 2 of them. Okay, so this is written in the rules too, but it's a little obscure. So you can't. So you get 2 actions in a combat round typically, unless you have the swift actions ability, or you succeed in the opening round of initiative. You critically succeed. So you can't use both of your actions to cast a spell. It's just way too much mental and spiritual duress to do that. Uh, Remember, in Savage Kingdoms, in this setting, ritual casting is really the main way to do it, particularly in PCs. That's I'd say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, non-player characters, particularly priests, they're using ritual spell. They don't. There's no reason they're not in these like combat scenarios typically, or these intense moments where they have to like spontaneously cast a spell within like as an action for 3 seconds. Normally, they're taking their time a whole hour ritual. Um, so that's kind of explains why you can't cast more than one spell in the same turn. Um, Again, the only caveat would be if you get a third action from like critically succeeding your initiative roll in the beginning of combat, you can use that bonus action basically to do anything, cast a spell, even an attack action. Um, or if you have the swift actions talent and you choose to use it, would get a third. So that's the only caveat. The only time you could cast 2 spells in the same round is if you somehow get 3 actions. Cool. All right. Oh wait, but the end of that sentence was, but you may attempt 2 of them. And what that means is, so if you spend an action to cast a spell and it doesn't work, doesn't manifest correctly, you still spend the stamina, by the way. You may use your second action to try again, to try not necessarily the same spell, but another spell, or it could be the same spell. So if the spell fails, you can try it again, and hopefully it'll succeed the second time. All right. Number 4. You may continue a first action movement after an attack action if you still can. Meaning that, all right, so again, 2 action combat round in general. So if you move, say your mobility is 10, which is average, that's 10 yards per round, per 6 seconds of movement. Um, and you're trying to close with an opponent that's 6 yards away. So you'd move 6 yards up. Say you did an attack, you made an attack. You have 4 yards left to continue your movement if you want to. So it's the continuation of that first action. If you want to. Obviously, if you continue on, they would get a free reactive attack against you if that opponent so chooses. There's a talent called Hit and Run, which helps with that. So if you want to build a very mobile type warrior, I haven't seen people do that often. I think people are not maybe reading deeper into some of the talents. That's a way to do it. So you can Hit and Run gives you when you do a free reactive attack, it's in a -2 penalty because it's done very quickly. So if you have Hit and Run, people striking at you as a free attack have a -5 penalty. So it's pretty difficult to hit someone who has Hit and Run as a talent. So yeah, there you go. Number 5. Asterisked talents may only be taken after character creation and with GM approval and at least 1 month of downtime. This comes up pretty often. It is in there in the book, but it's in like the last paragraph of the talent chapter before it gets into the talent descriptions. And I think most people just want to go right to the descriptions and not read like the 3 paragraphs before, but it's in there. Pretty sure anyway. Or it's in there somewhere. But it mentions that a talent that has an asterisk next to its title, that means that talent can generally supposed to be taken at character creation, but it can be taken afterwards with GM approval, and it suggests 1 month of downtime. Because these represent talents that are typically things you would either be born with or it would take months or years to hone. Magic affinity is a good example. It's a mystical talent. It gives you the ability to, unlike acolyte and apprentice, which gives you some like actual background training. Magic affinity, as you can tell in the title, is more an affinity, more of a natural sort of knack or gift. Um, And you don't necessarily have to have it at birth. Perhaps you did, kind of expose yourself to that later on. But again, that 1 month of downtime kind of like helps explain it. And it's not hard fast. Obviously, the game master can do what he wants, he or she wants to with his own, or her own setting. Um, so maybe it's just a week downtime, or maybe you require an entire winter, 3 months or whatever. But anyway, that's a good guideline, and it does say it in there. And at the very least, GM approval. Let your game master know about it, that you've taken a talent that has an asterisk next to it as part of your last advancement. Right. Number 6, you must have one social talent at character creation. This doesn't get overlooked a whole lot, but it has enough to where I decided to bring it up here, obviously. So having social talents is the only talent that you have to start with at least one of. That was a clunky sentence. So literally the only category of talents that you need at least one talent at character creation. And that's to help to explain your background. So these are things like highborn, mariner, woodsman, mountaineer. There's some others, but those are good examples. So they explain kind of where your character's been before, not necessarily where they've been, maybe where they're still going. Maybe you're still actively a mountaineer when you go into the mountains. Your senses are engaged, and you get all the benefits of the talent, obviously. Or if you're still plying your craft as a woodsman, it may be part of your calling if particularly if you're a scout or a hunter or something like that. So yeah, so you have to have at least one social talent at character creation. Okay, moving on to number 7, ritual components of spells, and that's all I put, as if to try to cue my memory precisely what that means. And I think it's this. Okay, ritual components of spells. So when you cast a spell as a ritual, and you can technically cast any spell as a ritual, it takes an hour. If you have the extended ritual talent, it takes 4 hours and an extra stamina point, but it gives you a +5 bonus to your magical arts skill roll to see if the spell works and how effective it is, instead of just the normal +2 for a ritual. So you have to have at least, and it says each spell description says must have at least 2, in some cases 3. So the general way it goes, the design portion of it, any spell that's DL 25 or higher will require at least 3 components, almost in all cases. Not all, but 98% of the time. And any spell that's difficulty level 20 or less to cast is usually only need 2 components for. So let me give you an example. All right, so just turn randomly to the Death Speak spell. Death Speak spell is basically like Speak of Dead from some other games. Um, you need at least 2 of the following, or 3 of the following if DL 25 or higher, because the DL can be higher if you're trying to speak with a corpse that's over a year old or up to a decade old. So it says at least 2 of the following. You need a black or white candle, a drop of fresh blood, a bit of fresh food or wine, or being inside a renowned mausoleum or cairn or tomb. So yeah. So as you can tell, ritual components are very sympathetic. So anybody who's kind of like studied like real magic, traditional magic, that sympathetic means things that are sympathetic to each other, that are related to each other, I guess might be a better term. So black or white candle. Black and white candles are typically associated with life or death. Food or wine represents enticing the spirit to come forth to the mortal world. Carnal pleasures to want to talk to you. Being inside a mausoleum or cairn or tomb is probably obvious. Blood, drop of blood is associated with life and death. So yeah, right there. So there are certain components that give you an additional +1. In this case, Death Speak, a pinch of dirt from a grave white's tomb or the tooth or nail of a vampire grants a +1 bonus to all ritual castings of the spell. So in other words, a +1 additional bonus. So that would give you, if you happen to have one of those things, in addition to the things you're supposed to have, you would get a +3 bonus to your magical arts roll after doing a ritual instead of just +2. So very cool. A little side note to that. So I think it was early D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, when you had material components for spells, they vanished mysteriously. I guess they were part of the. I always describe it as part of the energy that was required from the spell, and it kind of burned up those components. So, but in Savage Kingdoms, these items that you're using, they don't mysteriously disappear. You can use them over and over in different rituals as long as you still have them and don't lose them and or have them destroyed or whatever. So there you go, a little bit about ritual. So that's how ritual components work. I think most people have been pretty good with it, but there's been some minor confusion. So hopefully that clears that up. Right. Okay. Number 8. You can start with my writing. Start with my writing is actually pretty good. I'm just kind of like wrote it really fast. You can start. Oh, right. I know what I meant to say here. So you can only start with a number of third level skills at character creation equal to 5 plus your intellect. And I think most people know this, but occasionally I get people, some of my players turning in character sheets and they clearly didn't really see that. But for the most part, it's been fine, but worthy of being mentioned. So yeah, you can only, so at character creation, you can only start, your skills can only be up to skill level 3 is the maximum that you can start with. And you can only start with a number of those skills that are third level skill level equal to 5 plus your intellect. So let's say you're playing character has a +1 intellect, little above average intelligence. You could start with 6 skills that have 3 skill levels in them. You don't have to be any of them, or could it be only 4? But that's the maximum. So yeah, that kind of gets overlooked sometimes. All right, number 8. No, that was number 8. Number 9. So in the equipment chapter, you'll notice in the weapons section, particularly armor as well, but in the weapons section, you can see there's a little, the last category are weapon characteristics or traits. But anyway, most weapons have some different little characteristic. One might have disarm, ones that you can throw or have range, obviously. Armor piercing is a big one, or AP. So there are some that say agi, as for agility, and phi for physique, meaning, and then a number, and that means you have to have, and it's in the book, but just want to bring it up. So that means you have to have a minimum of that attribute in order to wield the weapon correctly, not like period, but correctly. So for every point short you are of that, let's say for example you're trying to wield a battle axe with one hand, which I think requires at least physique +0, which is average. But your physique is -1, your character's. So you can still wield it, but you would wield it at a -2 penalty. So for every point short of the minimum that's listed is a -2 penalty. If you were trying to do that with, say, a physique 2 character, then it would be -4, right? -2 times 2. So that's how that works. And some weapons that's with agility, such as whips and flails, because you can hit yourself in the back of the head if you don't know what you're doing with stuff like that. So yeah, yeah. So every point you're short of agility or physique, whatever's listed, is a -2 penalty. All right, number 10, reach weapons. Okay, reach weapons are kind of interesting. So all weapons are considered reach 1 by default, unless they literally list in that characteristics category that I just talked about, reach, unless it literally says reach 2 or reach 3. So all other weapons are considered reach 1, meaning 1 yard. They have a 1 yard reach. In some games it's 5 feet, but in Savage Kingdoms we use yards. It's probably slightly more realistic actually that it's a 3 yard. A lot of these weapons are very personal space. And but a reach 2 weapon means you can thrust up to 2 yards away. Reach 3 means you can use that weapon up to 3 yards away. So so here's the deal. So if you reach the reach of a okay, let's say for example you're playing a character with let's say you're using a longsword and you're charging at an opponent or advancing on an opponent that has a war spear, which is a reach of 2. Longsword only has a reach of 1. When you enter that reach area of the war spear wielding opponent, that opponent would get a free reactive attack, which is of course at -2, like all free reactive attacks, unless you have the opportunistic strike talent. So once you enter that, just like visualize it like it would really be in real life, or if any of you ever fought medieval reenactments, stuff like that. Yeah, once you enter, that's the whole point of having a reach weapon, really, the main point anyway. So remember that. So if the same longsword person's entering a reach 3 zone, the reach 3 wielder, which is like a pike or some pole arms or whips. You only get the one attack. You don't get like the free attack at the 3 yard range and then the 2 yard range. So it's just the one free attack. 'Cause that's all you get anyway as a reaction. So yeah, and here's a caveat to that. So a reach 3 weapon, say for example the longsword person is like closes all the way within the reach of the longsword, which means he's just 1 yard away from the 3 reach weapon wielder. Then the reach 3 weapon wielder has a -2 penalty because he has to choke up on the pike or the whip, whatever it is. So kind of a cool rule. Gets a little overlooked. Not a super big deal if you don't remember it, but it adds another little level of kind of realism, as I use in quotes. So yeah, so that's how all of that works. It's very cool, I think. Reach weapons. Okay. Number 11. Skill rolls. Skill rolls. Change circumstances or 1 hour. Okay. So when using skills, when making skill rolls, particularly, or skill checks or skill tests, um, in order to get it, so if you fail at one, in order to gain another one, you have to change your circumstances. And again, this is all explicitly in the book, but just thought I'd bring it out. Um, but it can't be like a minor thing. So, for example, you come to a portcullis, right? An iron gate, we'll say, and your character is like you're trying to get by, you don't have the key or whatever, and it's stuck. You're trying to push it up into the ceiling because it looks like it's how it works, but it's stuck and old, and you're having to. So perhaps you have to make a physique check, a physique roll. It's not even a skill roll in this case, but just raw physique, D20 plus your physique. Um, the game master might allow you to use brawling. Actually, sometimes I do that. If so, that would be any skill levels in brawling plus your physique. Let's say you don't get it, right? You fail to get it. It's like just not getting up. So, but you need to get through it. Like there's an enemy behind you, or you need to get in there within a certain time zone, whatever it is the adventure is about. So you need to change your circumstance. You need to find a way to figure it out. So if your friend, your companion, you get a companion over to help you. So another person helping would change your circumstance, allowing you to get another roll. It would also allow them a physique roll as well, and you take the highest of the two. That's called skill cooperation, which is also in the skills chapter. Or say you have a flask of oil, and you're like, and you can actually reach up to where it goes, and you can grease it down really well. That might trigger the game master. In my case, it would, because that's clever thinking, and that probably would realistically help to give you another chance to do that. So anyway, any way you can noticeably, palpably change the circumstances gains you another skill roll. Things that might not work would be like, I can't get the gate up, and I'm going to take my cloak off, and maybe I'll get some more. Uh, Probably not, because that's kind of minor. I mean, maybe if the person was wearing this like heavy wolf pelt cloak, and it's noticeably you've given them a -1 skill penalty because it counts as armor, and then they take it off, then maybe that's enough to warrant another chance to get a little more freedom. But in general, something like that can be a little silly, and it's not quite enough actually. But things like lighting is good. I remember a character trying to sneak in, trying to pick a lock on a chest. They're sneaking into an NPC's bedchamber, and they were trying not to use light, right, and trying to be quiet so not to wake up the non-player character, this fairly powerful ruler, and so he couldn't get the lock, and then he allowed himself. He was like, "All right, I'm going to get a candle going as much as light as I can and try to bank it just to get some light." And it worked. It was enough to get change the circumstances. He got another roll and another skill, a lock picking roll, and succeeded. So yeah, stuff like that. The little addition to that, it says or 1 hour. So tasks that are difficulty level 15, DL 15 or less, if you wait an hour as well, you can try again. And this is kind of almost like a hand wave. Like if you're bogging down with players, like I'm going to try that over and over, you can just simply go. If you refocus, if you spend an hour to just kind of chill and try it, tackle it again, you get another check. Anything of DL higher than that, though, is not the 1 hour thing. You got to come up with different things. Those represent more complex and more difficult tasks. So there you go. All right, number 12. Getting through this thing, getting close to the end. Number 12, stamina recovery. So stamina is recovered 1 point per hour of dedicated rest. The key word there is dedicated. So in other words, sleep. Sleep is definitely dedicated rest. That's the primary purpose of sleep. Um, and after a full 8 hours of sleep, you gain all your stamina back anyway. So, for example, say you're down 12 stamina points during your day's travels and adventures, and after 8 hours of sleep, you get all 12 back, not just eight. Otherwise, it's 1 point per hour of dedicated rest, in this case, sleep. So it gets iffy when I did have a character in the past who would ride in a wagon, and she was a sorceress. That was like her main thing. She used almost all of her stamina, almost always was for spell casting. And she would ride in this wagon and chill out, and that was fine. I allowed it to happen because that's really all she was doing. She wasn't driving the wagon. She wasn't really wasn't really paying a lot of attention. She was literally kind of resting. And they generally stayed on these pretty nice, decent roads. It was a four-wheeled wagon, not a cart, so it wasn't really that bumpy. So I allowed that. The opposite of that is that recently someone was driving a two-wheeled cart, and like I just said, driving it, and not just riding, and asked if he had gotten any stamina back. And I'm like, no, it's not dedicated, because your dedication right here, your main focus is literally driving the horses, driving this or the mule to pull this cart. So yeah, look for there's some fine line in there so yeah. And then there's a talent called meditative trance. It allows you to gain stamina back once, 2 per hour, or one every half hour, however you want to track it. So yeah, so there is a caveat or two to that, but mainly you recover 1 stamina point per hour of dedicated rest. Right. Number 13, stamina leads right into health. Somewhat similar. Health recovery. So the formula for health, and again, this is all written pretty in a couple places at the beginning of the book, but health recovery, natural healing recurs. You heal 1 plus your vigor per 24 hours of rest. It means not fighting, not sprinting, just kind of chilling, light activity or less. I mean, you could be cooking food, eating, walking around, that's fine. So if you have long-term care that's on you, that's successfully been applied to you, you recover twice that. In other words, 1 plus your vigor and health points per 12 hours, or double that every 24 hours, however your game master wants to track it. I typically do every 12 hours because most PCs want their health back as quickly as possible, which I don't blame them. So that's how that works. And there's things like quick healer. The quick healer talent adds a +2 to that. So you heal 3 points plus your vigor per 12 or 24 hours of rest, depending on long-term care or not is happening. By the way, the minimum is 1. You always heal 1 point per 24 hours, or 1 point per 12 hours with long-term care, regardless of your vigor, even if it was like -2 or -3 or something. Right. Number 14, mobility for climb, swim, etc. All right, so on your character sheet, there's mobility is one of your derived traits, one of your traits, and that is how fast you can move in yardage per action. So the average mobility is 10, and we'll use that for an example. So mobility of 10, that's your base. So run is ×2, so that would be 20, and that's on your character sheet. Sprint speed is not on there. That's actually ×3. The reason it's not because it doesn't come up as much. So there's only base, climb, and swim. Sprint is ×3 your base movement, and it costs a stamina point because you're just hauling. And then your climb speed on the character sheet is 1/3 of your base mobility in yards, or you can use the full number in feet because it comes out the same. And usually in vertical movement, it's probably easier to track feet than it is yards. Yards is really was more for expansive, territory, strides, yards. So that's why we use yards actually. And then swim is half of your base mobility in yards. So yeah, and that's on the character sheet. So it's pretty simple. There's two modes of travel that aren't on there. Like I said, sprint is ×3, and then crawl. Crawling is 1/4 of your base speed. It's not on your character sheet, but if it ever comes up, there you go. It's in the book, but just so you know from the video. Right, the last one, encumbrance and bulk. Okay, so encumbrance is a thing. Obviously, you can only carry so much, depending generally on your physique. And then bulk. So you've noticed in the gear section of Savage Kingdoms, we don't track pounds anymore. We track bulk. It's a lot easier. So most items, I would say, have 0 bulk. So in other words, they only weigh a couple pounds or whatever. But certain things that are kind of heavy, at least usually they're around 12 to 15 pounds, or they're just kind of like a sack of feathers. Might only weigh 2 or 3 pounds, but it might be bulk too, right? Because it's taking up this big area. So So some items have 0 bulk, and remember, every 10 items, 10 0 bulk items equals 1 bulk. There are some items with 2 asterisks instead of 1 next to them that it takes 20 items. For example, 20 candles equals 1 bulk instead of 10. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That gets overlooked a lot. So every 10 items that have 0 bulk equal 1 bulk, unless it has a double asterisk. In that case, it takes 20 items to equal 1 bulk. So yeah, so make sure you add all those up when you're adding up your character's encumbrance. Simple, right? Okay, I think that's it. We got through it in only like 30 minutes. So thanks for paying attention. Share the video, watch it. Hopefully you made it all the way to the end. And these were clarifications and little hidden gems and stuff like that in the Savage Kingdoms cool rulebook, Savage Kingdoms 3. Hope you guys are enjoying the videos and enjoying the game especially. And I will talk to you again soon.